Well, if you are a Gen Xer, are you ready for retirement? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, Northwestern Mutual, an enormous financial company, comes out with a survey each year on the state of finances in America. And it just so happened that a lot of what they went through this year with their survey pointed to one generation in particular, which was the Generation X. That I am a proud member of, for whatever that's worth. But this is what they came up with from the survey. They said 54%, and that's birth dates between 1965 and 1980, don't think that they will be prepared for retirement. 56% think that they will outlive their savings and not leave any inheritance for their children. And I've always found that really interesting because I see all the various surveys and studies that are done, things that are published. I get reports emailed to me all the time for the program, and I always come to one statistic that kind of brings some of these survey results out into the open and asks the question, are these really valid? Of course, if you've listened to me for any time period, you know that what I think about surveys. I mean, they're okay and they give us a general idea. But it's impossible, I personally think, to take 1,000 people in a country where there's 327 million people and say, this is the way people feel. But what I always come up with is one question. How do you know you're not going to have enough to retire on? How do you know you won't live your kids' money as you've always wanted to do? It's a valid question because if you look at the statistics that I was referring to a little while ago, you would find that most people have not done a financial plan. Now, when I talk about financial plans, I'm talking about something maybe different than what you're used to. So let me define it for you. A financial plan is simply a plan that will show you what your numbers are. I have a saying that I used to use all the time: know your unknowns. That's how you make it, and that's how you're successful with achieving your goals. If you know your unknowns, and your unknowns are, when am I going to be able to retire from what I'm doing now full time and fully enjoy retirement? When am I going to be able to pay off a house? What are my numbers? What are the unknowns? So how do you know that you are stuck and you're not going to be able to retire? I would suggest that people base the question of the interviewer as one that this is what I think the situation is. I think probably there is no way that I'm going to retire. I'm definitely hesitant to suggest that I might. Now, given that, there's a lot of statistics that there are a lot of people, unfortunately, in this country who fit that mold. But even then, it's not always valid. So how do you know? Well, I think you have to look at several pieces of data to come to the conclusion, along with myself, that all of these studies are a little messed up. when they come to their conclusions. So let's take a little dive in and take a look at the study. Number one, Gen Xers who were interviewed in this study said that, came to a conclusion, and this is the majority of the respondents, that it's going to take $1.57 million. Not 1.58, not 1.50, but $1.57 million to retire. I just find that fascinating on so many levels, because if you haven't done a plan, you'll never know. And this suggests that everybody's running on the same plan. It's going to take everybody $1.57 million. And that, my friends, is where the problem comes into. Is that this whole idea of one plan fits all. That, used to, I say used to, it's maybe a year ago, you could not go on to Yahoo Finance or Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or any of these sites that publish data, because they're all telling you need at least $1 million to retire. And the funniest thing to me, and what really downplays the credibility of some of these articles or studies, is that they say to the person who's 20 years out, you have to have $1 million in your account, investments, to lead the kind of retirement that you want. When $1 million 20 years from now is not going to be the same $1 million that it is today. For whatever reason, they never point that out, and they never point out that inflation is has a big part in all of this. And then just experiences I've had with meeting with prospects and clients that talking about when they want to retire, and I'll never forget this. This laid a real impression on me. That this a friend of mine's mom, I went to visit her. We sat down and we talked about her financial situation. I wrote down a bunch of the key numbers, and she had something like over $2 million sitting in investments. Which, by the way, I've been asked this question so many times. Is that unusual for people to have that much money stored back? Actually, it kind of is. The majority of people, investors, don't have that kind of money put back. Just an interesting thing I'll throw in there. Your average everyday person, your ultra rich, obviously, are going to have that kind of money. So she had $2 million in investments. She had Social Security. She had a pension. She was 62 years old. And the financial advisor said to her, no, you will not be able to retire. You will not be able to do this on your terms when you want to. And I looked at the numbers and I said, I absolutely disagree and have no idea what numbers he's looking for or how he learned how to do this. But you don't even have to wait till you're 65. You could retire when you're 62. And listen, I understand the seriousness of making that kind of statement, because boy, I better be right, or I had better be given a reasonable answer, because if I'm wrong, she could make horrible mistakes and decisions that really don't fit her situation. So Why do you think they picked on Generation X? Once again, my generation. Because, and this is my own theory, that they are the most financially messed up generations of all of them. That's why I tell you that I'm part of it, because I can proudly say that. That Generation X, and if you look at it, you'll see where I'm going with this. Generation X, in the 80s, there was a huge credit card boom that started in colleges and extended and got much, much bigger in the 90s, in the 2000s, and then President Obama signed into law the Card Act in 2009, which limited what they could do, credit card companies could do as far as students go. But during that time period, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, students of colleges learned some horribly bad habits. Like, get 4 or 5 credit cards, because they'd give them to you if you wanted to. You didn't have to prove that you were working or anything. They gave you those credit cards. And people and friends of mine were just out there spending money. I had one person say to me, "Do you mean I have to pay this back?" This was the kind of financial literacy of Generation X's time. Do you think I have to pay this back? Well, that question will answer on the other side. This is Bob Brooks. You are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks. We'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Jesus made a way for men and women to enter God's kingdom, but not everyone will pass through the gates. Find out why as we learn about Christ's response to the society's marginalized, the least, the last, and the left out, this week on Truth for Life with Alistair Begg.
Weekdays at 5:30 a.m. here on 91.3 KDKR.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson, host of Point of View. I encourage you to listen to our program on KDKR on Monday and Friday from 1 to 3 o'clock. We look at contemporary issues from a biblical perspective. Tune in and join in the discussion.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. By the way, if you have a question for me, I failed to mention this earlier, there's a couple ways to get that question answered. And I really mean this because I hear all stories of financial programs and send a question in and it goes into a big dark hole and you never get an answer. You go through all that time to get nothing. That's not what happens here. So I love getting your questions, and you go to prudentmoney.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for the email letter list, because that's the best way to stay plugged in. And we put a lot of information out there. So I want to make sure that you are well aware of what's going to be released and what we're writing about and talking about. It's all about stewardship. So that's one way. The other one is, if you wanted to call in here in the next 10, 12 minutes, you can call 1-877-913-5357, and I will take your call. I'd love to talk to you. So 1-877-913-5357. Guy named Chris will answer the phone. Be nice to him. He works really hard. And yeah, give us a call. We'll love to talk about it. So the question before, does she have to pay it back? You see, I put that out there as a question so it would entice you to stay over. Of course she's got to pay it back. She was shocked. I was shocked she asked the question. So, yes, you have to pay it back, but when you would get overdue bills, the overdue bills would just say, hey, when you get a chance, you're a little overdue, you're 10 days late, could you send us a check to pay for your monthly bill? We're very nice about it. Of course, that all changed, right? And I truly believe that Generation X developed some seriously bad habits. And credit card debt will do that to you. If you start and you build on it and you build on it and you build on it, the next thing you know, you have all your credit tapped. That, my friends, causes some problems. But that is what we knew during that time period. So the question is, can Generation X actually retire? And what do they do at this point? Better yet, said another way, what does somebody 5 to 10 years out from retirement do right now? That's what we're focusing on. So the number one is to evaluate your habits. Habits tell so much about a person. Tells so much about their character. It tells so much about what's important to them, what they value. And credit card debt is one of those gods with a little g. Credit card debt you can beyond credit card debt, you can buy a real nice foreign expensive car. You can buy all the clothes that you want to impress people with. You can buy that brand new briefcase. I mean, you can buy all these things if you got enough credit. And the whole idea is to pay that credit off, that debt off. The life changes, and so you develop so many bad habits. What I would encourage you to do is make a list of the bad habits. Not addressing problems, procrastinating, not seeking ways to get out of debt, developing a spending plan. If you've listened to me in the past, because remember we were broadcasting on the radio on the station here at KDKR at 3 to 3:30. We moved from 4:30 to 5. What I've always said is I don't believe in budgets. I believe in a system that I call a spending plan. Because budgets at some point are going to tell you that you failed, probably, because it takes so much unnecessary discipline to stay in a budget. Spending plan is is a whole lot more flexible, tied to your values. We'll talk about it at some point. It's in my book, Deceptive Money, if you want to check that out. So, habits, and I'll never forget this, is that I happen to get a lot of books, which I always feel very blessed by, and I typically know they're coming because the PR agent says, Bob, I'd love for you to have client A on the program, talk about his new book, her new book. And I say, great. I do screen these books. Sometimes you wonder if I did or not, but I do. And then there's the books that just come unannounced. And so I always think, what is God trying to tell me about this book? because it just came up, it showed up unannounced, and I'm always curious. So this book about habits came in, and two weeks later, James Clear's book about habits came in. Like I said, I did not request these or anything. So I thought to myself, 2 books on habits within 2 weeks of each other. Maybe God's telling me something. And of course, He was telling me, He was shooting fireworks trying to tell me that I've got some bad habits. So, got to break away from them, which is the toughest thing, is to do that. But you've got to focus on what habits do you want to have, and what habits make the most sense. By the way, James Clear went on to be a huge. It was so cool to interview him because I interviewed him before he hit it big, and the book he wrote, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Something Habit. Oh, Atomic Habits. Phenomenal book. But he deserves the fame that he has gotten from that book, because that book has helped change a lot of people, and it's just a great book. But focus in on your habits. The second thing, we've already mentioned it, but I want to just glance over. I just want to do a run by real quick, and then we'll go on. Make sure you're using realistic numbers, that you're focusing in on inflation and the other things that can be variables. Always make sure of that. Remember, 1 million, you may or you may not need it. There's so many things. You know, I talk about pop culture finance. When I talk about pop culture finance, I'm talking about financial media. I'm talking about Wall Street. I'm talking about CNBC. All of the outlets that tell you what to do with your money. They act as if that these are absolute truths. That if you just focus on these particular numbers, these particular items, you will get where you want to go. It's that easy. It's always easy, right? Maybe not, if you agree with me. It's not always easy. But they make it out like it is so easy. But you see, the truth is, there's only one absolute truth. That there are no absolute truths. Hope that made sense. It's a little bit of a catchy phrase. But the truth is, there is no absolute truth, because money is so complicated. And the problem with money is that most of the time, 2 plus 2 equals 4 when it comes to money. But sometimes 2 plus 2 equals 5. Or 3 plus 3 equals 8. And we don't know what to do when that happens. But it does happen. It's not always cut and dry and easy as they say that it is. So want to make sure and talk about that. So that leaves us with quite a bit more to talk about, and I am wrapping up the end of the program. So I want to just tell you about a few resources, and we'll continue our talk. Tomorrow we'll continue our talk, and I'll look forward to it. If you go to prudentmoney.com, there's a lot of articles and things that I've written. There is a podcast for every show that we put out there. And you can listen to that podcast on any platform that you like to get your podcast. So we're at our website, www.prudentmoney.com, and we're at Apple and Spotify and all those good things. Most importantly, make sure you sign up for the email letter list. That'll keep you posted. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.